There is a food so ancient that it predates the written word. It sits in cold storage in every kitchen on earth, shaved over pasta, melted onto bread, packed into the rations of soldiers and the stores of kings. It is taken for granted, sliced without thought, consumed in the dark. And yet this one coagulated mass of milk has, across 10,000 years, reshaped human migration, built standing armies, preserved the calories that fueled conquest, and become the invisible engine behind the rise and fall of civilizations. Its name is cheese. And its story is the story of how an accidental curdling inside a Neolithic stomach bag became the fuel of empire, the currency of war, and the quiet architect of the modern world. The story begins not with invention, but with desperation. 10,000 years ago, humans in the Fertile Crescent began carrying milk in containers made from animal stomachs. They did not know that the enzymes lining those stomachs, rennet, would curdle the milk into something that did not spoil. What emerged was a dense, portable block of nutrition that could survive seasons, cross deserts, and outlast famine. Unlike meat, which rotted within days, or grain, which required fire and grinding, cheese was predigested by enzymes, concentrated by time, and ready to eat without preparation. It was the first preserved food that did not require constant human labor to maintain. A Neolithic farmer could store the energy of spring milk into the starvation of winter, trade it across valleys, and survive droughts that wiped out less prepared tribes. And in that single accident, the balance of power shifted from the hunter to the herder, from the nomad to the settler, from the tribe that starved to the tribe that endured. By the time Rome marched across 3 continents, cheese was no longer peasant survival. It was military infrastructure. Roman legions did not travel with live cattle. They traveled with hard, dry wheels of pecorino, sheep's milk cheese that could survive heat, humidity, and months in a pack without refrigeration. A single soldier carried enough salted cheese to march 20 miles a day without stopping to forage. Roman engineers built roads to move armies, but cheese moved the soldiers who built the roads. On the frontiers of Britannia and Germania, cheese was currency, medicine, and morale. Forts along Hadrian's Wall have yielded cheese residues in pottery 2,000 years old. The empire did not expand because it had better swords or larger men. It expanded because it had better logistics. And at the center of that logistics chain was a fermented block of milk that refused to die, refused to spoil, and refused to let an army starve. After Rome fell, the knowledge of cheese did not vanish. It retreated into stone walls and silence. Medieval monasteries became the laboratories of Europe, and cheese was their primary engineering project. Monks in France, Switzerland, and Italy spent centuries refining the art of controlled spoilage. They invented washed rind, blue mold, and aged hard cheeses not for pleasure, but for cold, calculated preservation. A wheel of aged cheese could feed a community through siege and plague when all other stores had failed. The Cistercian order in particular transformed European agriculture by perfecting the closed loop. Cattle grazed on marginal land that could not grow grain, produced milk, which became cheese, which was traded for grain, iron, and salt. These were not cooks pursuing flavor. They were agricultural engineers who understood that cheese was stored land, stored labor, and stored time compressed into a wheel. Without their refinement, the European population could not have doubled between the 10th and 14th centuries. The cities that followed were built on the calories those monks locked into wax and brine. When Europeans crossed the Atlantic, they carried cheese with them as both provision and identity. Cheddar traveled to New England. Dutch wheels sailed to New Amsterdam. But in the American experiment, cheese underwent a transformation that would ultimately betray its own history. The 19th century saw the rise of the factory system, and with it, the death of terroir. Milk was pooled from hundreds of farms, heated, standardized, and stripped of its microbial complexity. In 1851, the first cheese factory opened in New York, and the race toward industrial homogenization began. By the 20th century, American cheese had become a processed commodity, orange, individually wrapped, and chemically stable. The craft revolution did not improve cheese. It replaced it with an industrial simulacrum designed for shelf life, not nutrition. What had once been the product of specific valleys, specific molds, and specific seasons was now extruded in identical blocks across a continent. The empire of cheese had conquered the world, only to consume its own soul in the process. But the greatest betrayal of cheese came not from industry. It came from science. In the 1950s, a hypothesis emerged that saturated fat and cholesterol caused heart disease. The American Heart Association, funded in part by vegetable oil interests, declared war on butter, lard, and cheese. For 50 years, the Western world was told to replace ancient animal fats with industrial seed oils and synthetic spreads. The result was catastrophic. Populations that had eaten cheese for millennia were now consuming trans fats and refined carbohydrates in its place. Obesity rates exploded. Diabetes became epidemic. And cheese, one of the most nutritionally complete foods ever developed by human accident, was pushed to the margins of the plate. The irony was absolute. The food that had preserved European health through plague and famine was now labeled a threat by the same industrial complex that had already destroyed its traditional production. The attack on cheese was not medical. It was economic. And the body count is still rising. Today, the global cheese industry produces over 20 million metric tons annually. Most of it is not cheese in the ancient sense. It is a product of industrial microbiology, standardized cultures, and economies of scale that demand the destruction of the small producer. The modern dairy farm is an energy-intensive machine powered by imported soy, fossil fuels, and antibiotics. The calf is separated from the milk source within hours of birth. The milk is pasteurized to erase microbial identity, then inoculated with laboratory strains that produce uniform, predictable curd. What reaches the supermarket is a ghost of the original accident, safe, legal, and nutritionally hollow. And yet the demand grows. Pizza chains, burger empires, and processed food conglomerates consume cheese by the ton, not as a food, but as an industrial adhesive that binds starch and salt into palatable form. The ancient engine of empire has become the wallpaper of modern consumption, invisible and omnipresent. You will eat cheese today. You will not think about the Neolithic stomach bag that started it. You will not think about the Roman soldier who marched on Pecorino, or the monk who aged a will through winter, or the industrial lie that convinced you to fear it. You will taste salt and fat and assume it is simple. But nothing that built Rome, populated Europe, and crossed the oceans in wooden ships is simple. The next time you hold a wedge of cheese, understand that you are holding 10,000 years of stored survival, 10,000 years of conquest, and 10,000 years of betrayal. And ask yourself whether what you are eating still deserves the name.